Hello, hi, welcome back. It is ACC Baseball Etc, part of the D1 Baseball Podcast Network. I said welcome back. In case you're new here, we're here all season. If you're a fan of an ACC baseball program, perhaps Georgia Tech, as we will welcome James Ramsey here in just a second, we would love to have you throughout the span of the year. Danny Graves is normally here. He's not today. I'm Daron Vaught. Bradley Smart is here. You can find his stuff at d1baseball.com, ACC Extra. Of course, make sure you get your subscriptions right as the season's beginning is right around the corner. All right, with that being said, we continue our preseasoning head coach interviews today with the highest preseason ranked ACC team, according to the D1 Baseball preseason top 25. It is James Ramsey, first year at the helm of the number 5 Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. JR, great to see you. Last you and I talked, you had just gotten promoted to head coach. How much has your life settled between then and now? Will you feel that way until you maybe get a full year under your belt?
Yeah, Daron and Bradley, good to be with you guys. I think I remember being in a hotel room in the Cape.
Yep.
And now I guess you can talk about all this stuff now that they're signed and they're here. But it was Jaron and Vicula, and obviously seeing a lot of our guys that were playing up there. But we had Shattuck commit, and then you have Jaron and Vicula. We're going to breakfast burrito spots, right? You're checking in, you're trying to talk, and you're competing with some of the best schools in the country, and you're figuring out, we're going to get this guy or not. And so I think starting out in year one, obviously it's been well documented, from our side, but keeping the staff together was huge. And then the player acquisitions and really, going through the retaining process. I've said this to multiple different people, but we didn't have to have a single conversation about retention specific to the guys that were on our roster on an AC regular season champion team. And so that's been huge, because I think when you look at being a first-year head coach or being in a new program, whatever that looks like, when you're all going through it together, obviously you're all having changes in job descriptions and whatnot. But for me, going through it with the staff and then having, this incredible talent, we were able to add some really key pieces through the portal since we spoke. And so now, we're primed and ready, and it's to the point where, this team does have high expectations for itself. And I think really we're just ready to get it all and start playing on the field as much as anybody, because I do think we feel good about each other. But I think we are understanding, especially going through the journey last year, like we spoke about being a very young and inexperienced team that ended up winning the league. You never know what the journey is gonna be until you actually start getting into it together. So I think for this year's team, I think the expectations are high inside the building. Obviously, I think the recognition, I think is warranted to be, in the conversation of being a really great team. But, the most fun part is when we actually get to go out and start playing against teams in other uniforms.
Yeah. And retention is kind of like the theme of your team. When you just look at, 80% of plate appearances back, I think almost 60% of innings pitched, your whole staff, kind of everyone just sort of moved up and settled in there. How big is it to, go into this first year where, you're in charge, but it's so familiar to, compare to last year?
Yeah. And I think that was the one thing that, working for Coach Hall, we all, benefited from. He gave us a lot of freedom, and hey, you go run what you do really well. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to write the names in the lineup, and a lot of times keep those guys in there. And so I think, we've all benefited from that, of saying, we need to continue to trust our players. I think the other part of it is, we have had to address, once again, the areas that we felt like were keeping us back from, getting to Omaha, from, once again, being at the level at the end of the season that, where we want to be as a program. And so I think you look at 7 high schoolers, 5 portal transfers, 12 guys is not a huge crop for incoming guys. And so I think we've been really targeted with what we're trying to look for. But if you look at our, 24 season transition into 25 season, it has been the theme of development and retention, and guys are really happy about where they're at. They have improved as players, and we've won as a team. And so I think that's, as you're building any program, those are going to be big focuses of ours, is continuing to stay with our guys, get them better, just kind of keep our heads down and just keep, improving each day. And now you look up and we're reaping the benefits of playing guys in 2024 as freshmen. And now they're juniors and they're experienced, and they've also just played together. I think there's a huge part of that cohesion piece that, you can look at, it's the Moneyball saying, right, of we're going to get one player, we're going to get the aggregate of players. But for us, I think the team chemistry side is something that you look at in all these sports. You can't really quantify that, but I think a pitcher that has pitched in our program before, a hitter that's played in our program, they know what's expected of them. And as much as coaches, we can go and look through all this stuff, there's going to be situations in baseball that if you've gone through it together, maybe it was a Thursday practice, something we went over, last season about ground rules at a ballpark that they've all heard that before, or it's a comeback win that they've been a part of, 2 seasons ago, that we can teach off of. And so I think that's been, a huge message is there wasn't a lot of onboarding time. I think from, the first practice we had in August, we were able to I always use the math analogy of like addition, subtraction, long division, calculus. You start we were starting way down the line, kind of installing our playbook. And so I think we had a really productive fall and we feel really good about where we're at right now.
That is such a huge luxury. You've got a lot of dudes that we want to talk about, so there are certainly a lot of particulars to dig into. Before we do that, though, one more follow-up on that, just because, you're always real with us, James, and I think if you look at the ecosystem of college athletics, even I get it, it's a new head coach with an asterisk because you've been there. It's not typical that a team kind of pops off with a great season, changes a head coach, and all the best players come back, right? I think we all understand that Drew Burress is like an animal unto himself, and he's said from the beginning he's going to be there 3 years, he's going to get his degree, he's going to get drafted. And we kind of expected him to remain a Yellow Jacket. That's not necessarily the case for everyone else. Do you? I guess. I mean, again, I just want to follow up and be sure of this. You didn't have one difficult conversation with any of those guys?
And I mean, the answer is really no, in the sense of throughout the course of the season with, the plans that were kind of in place and still wanting our administration to have their process of feeling like, there ended up not really being any external conversations, right? Which is a big testament to their trust in me and handing off a successful program. I think it also came into, listen, baseball is what we get paid to do, right? It's what the wins and the losses, and that's what ADs and boosters and people want to see out of you. But I think from a player side, it goes a little deeper. I think that if all you're doing every day is coaching baseball, then especially nowadays, you mentioned the type of young men we coach, they're always looking for something else. And that if you don't kind of make sure you're developing them as human beings and they don't feel like you have their back, then I think it's very easy to say, okay, I want more at bats, or, hey, I felt like I did this, but here's where, now that we're having money conversations, right? And so I think a lot of that was the players themselves were chomping at the bit to get the announcement out there of the, head coaching stuff, but there was never any panic because I think everyone inside the building knew the way the wind was blowing. But I think they also were extremely hungry. Listen, we don't want to minimize winning the ACC. The league's incredible. We haven't rested on those laurels at all, though, because at the end of the day, we go from a 1-run game or 2-run game, whatever it was, against Murray State, and then 1-run, 2-run game against Ole Miss, and your season's over 24 hours after you just come off this really good momentum. And so I think you go in that process of getting sent on the road for a regional, and there could be plenty of debates about ACC regular season champions hosting and rankings. So for me, the message, the guys, kind of had leave no doubt on, their weight room shirts waiting for them of, we were still in control of winning more, even though we ended up in the one spot in the league. Could have won it by 3 games, could have won, a couple more games, 1-run games throughout the course of the season against quality opponents that maybe push us over the edge. And so I think that led to the hunger. So this group didn't feel like they had accomplished what they wanted to. And then I think at the end of the day, the last thing is players will leave you if they don't feel like you're able to get them on to the next step professionally. And I think that's something that all these guys could say, whether it was 1 year transfer examples like a Kyle Lodi's. I mean, you go back to Chandler Simpson, you go back to Justin Henry Malloy. I mean, guys that are playing in the big leagues right now that transferred in for 1 year from other really good programs, but they're now in the big leagues doing exactly what they want to do. So when you look at, using Alex Hernandez, for example, or a Vaught Lackey or whatever, it's like, well, you can be a top 10 pick here. You can be the ACC Freshman of the Year here and also become a better pro prospect. And so I think the combination of those things, but then you don't want to leave out the culture side and the relationship side of the players feel like you have their back on and off the field. Why would they leave, when they feel like they're getting poured into on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that's well said. I appreciate you digging into that. Bradley, you want to get us started in terms of just like getting into this version of the Jackets?
Yeah. And I mean, the logical starting point is, you touched on some of them, is that offense. It's rare to see that many guys back in a starting lineup, and B, that produced at that level. Like, it's not like you're returning, a freshman that maybe hit, 230 and got some regular playing time. These are all guys that pretty much all hit over 300. What is it like when you're looking at this group offensively and you look at the depth you have too? How do you kind of game plan? Okay, there's guys here at the bottom that, could start for a lot of different teams. How do you manage all of that and sort of keep everyone, kind of moving forward towards that, same goal?
Yeah, I think it starts with just individual development. And I know it's such a buzzword, but it's like, okay, are there areas of a certain player's game? And you use like I love talking about Curse and Lackey, because they're baseball cards. If you just look at the real counting statistics, okay, maybe they weren't great, but we were so high on those guys and didn't want to recruit over them and stunt their development and see, but they needed to become more polished hitters. I mean, even Lackey from led Power 4 and hitting this fall, big emphasis on hitting the ball in the air, as simply put as that is, right? He talks about going to flight school, right? So when you're going to flight school, there's going to be some really bad days where you overcorrect and you do those things, but then you start to see the fruit of that labor, in live at bats last weekend, and throughout the course of the fall. I mean, he's been incredible. And so I think on the mound, it's okay, maybe we take a step back in a fall outing because we take away a pitcher's best pitch, or we're going to add a new pitch and we're just going to throw it, maybe not in a count that puts you in a good situation. If you need a 1-1 count, and we're going to throw a pitch that we want to become a zone pitch, but it's not a zone pitch right now, you could sit there and the player can be frustrated, but getting out ahead of it proactively of saying, okay, here's like almost like a reverse scouting report. We do a lot of that is, here's how we're going to game plan against you, said pitcher. And this is good, but how do we make you bulletproof, right? And so it's like, okay, it's another pitch. It's opening up a certain part of the zone that as a pitcher you can, expose hitters, or as a hitter is, okay, you did a great job, but you didn't hit lefties, even though you're right-handed. You didn't hit lefty breaking balls coming into you. And so when you start looking at that, there's always things these guys could improve on. And so I promise you that, you look at our 22 offense, which led the country, and you look at other teams that have, led the leagues or been in the top 2 or 5 nationally, like we've been there, done that. I think at the end of the day, it's telling these guys that they all individually can improve. Defensively, they can improve, and we can track that, as much as we ever have been able to. So then when you talk about the actual lineup construction or the offense, we have, saying a lot of times we talk about going 9v1 versus the pitcher, right? Of turning something that is, a lot of times a hitter, you can feel like you're facing 9 guys, right? But it's, if we can flip that through the way that we kind of go at it aggressively and know as a lineup, we're in this thing together. I think that's something we've done over the years pretty successfully, where all the guys end up, we talk about the plate size increasing that they get to eat off of if they all do their jobs. And if everybody's hitting 300 and OPS and 900 when the ACC tournament rolls around, I mean, we've had players transfer in, pitcher and hitter, that are literally like, man, when you guys roll into town, it's like a running joke of the lineup. Like, what do they do? What's in the water? What's in the training? And so it's fun because you're at the front of the line when a player is now transferring in. They've seen kind of the reputation carry itself. So I think that's the big thing for us to do is, how can we keep improving? And then, I mentioned this in an interview the other day, like winning or losing, is that's the end of the day what we're trying to do. If we win a game 1-0 or we, win a game 14-13, really in the building, that's all we care about. And so can we become a team that can win in a lot of different ways? And I think we showed that last year. You go on the road and you sweep Stanford, you sweep Notre Dame, you're able to your defense and your pitching travels, right? And so then you come back home and you do things you need to do and have a really strong home record and win most of the series here. Then you end up looking up and have a chance to win the league at the last day of the season. And a lot of different guys stepped up for us at Duke to win the ACC title.
With that individual development in mind, James, who is the guy, or maybe the 2 or 3 guys that now that preseason practices are underway, you expect to make the biggest jump, or you have seen the biggest jump?
Yeah, I think, I'll start on the mound. It'd be unfair to say that Dylan Loy, as a guy that, had 56 appearances at Tennessee over 2 years, is going to surprise us or surprise anyone to leap himself into a big role. And the same would be with Justin Shattuck, a guy that, has touched 100 miles an hour and throws multiple breaking balls and has just physically imposing. Those aren't like tough picks to click, but I do think those are 2 guys that have done an incredible job. And then I'd love to hit on the 3 freshman arms later. But then offensively, you talk about a Will Baker who goes back to, he had a great year for a freshman when we needed him to, has really taken steps forward. And then Ryan Zuckerman, I think, is a guy that we all knew he was going to be a stud. Has all the tools, has all the measurables. You compete against him, it's in there. I think the demeanor and like the way that he's impacted our clubhouse, just from the type of person he is. But when you're looking at him and he's in the box and he's hitting balls out foul line to foul line, and he's reduced his chase, and he's kind of done some of the things that, you grade out. We all do this, right? Bradley does these deep dives, right? And it's red, yellow, green, and it's top percentiles. Like, everybody knows what some of the Zuckerman issues were. But I think if you can lean into, we talk about like the boxing analogy, like he's a knockout puncher. So we're not trying to make him a defensive boxer. But if he also knows when to throw the punches at the right time and knows when to back off and kind of, play with the defense a little bit, I think that's been the fun part to see Zuckerman. So I think those are guys that immediately, what we were expecting obviously was high as it is, but just on a percentage basis, what we've already seen out of them and the stats we track that can project success, those are all guys that are going to take huge steps forward for us this year.
Yeah, Zuckerman's one of to me, the more interesting transfers in the league, just because the pure power and raw stuff he has. I'm really interested to see him in that lineup. And that him and Advincula, kind of, unique to see 2 ACC guys going to an ACC school. Obviously, you've seen them in person last year. What sort of, obviously, high-end talents, what was that sort of process like? Like, what was the sort of selling points with Georgia Tech, and how did that kind of play out?
Yeah, I think obviously these guys and their families, their representations, they all have self-interest, right? Of, hey, if I'm going to go to your school, what can I get out of it? And what can you do to make me a better player? I felt like with those 2 guys in particular, it all kept coming back to the current roster. I think, it was a cool story of hearing the Invicula family talk about, and Jaron himself say, hey, well, these other schools are awesome, and they were schools that have won national titles and been in the mix. And then he kind of compared us to the Los Angeles Dodgers. He's like, well, you guys are kind of like the Dodgers. And I was like pounding my fist. I'm like, you're darn right, we're the Dodgers, in your head, you're like, well, we don't have that payroll, but we do have the star power. And we do have that like almost magnet drawing people in because of the people in the building. And so that's between coaching staff, that's players. But when you think about Drew Burris and you think about Vaughn Lackey and you think about Carson Kearse, and then you add in Alex Hernandez and a Caleb Daniel and a Kent Schmidt, the guys that played consistently last year every single day, you see all the, it's a lot of smiles. It's a lot of competition. It's guys that are drawn to each other. And I think that is a big piece of a championship culture, is you have to have that where guys get little glimpses into your program. And sometimes, we all can project things on programs that maybe aren't the exact what's happening in the building, but we try to be super authentic with who we are and how we treat our guys. because they're our best recruiting coordinators. I mean, nowadays more than ever, guys are talking. And so, whether they're off playing summer ball or we have the guys playing in Team USA, I think it carries when those guys are able to connect, because inherently that's always how they run with the communication. And if you can have the right people in the building, that's what we would sell all the time, is come be a part of something super special. But we've already won. I think we weren't painting a vision that was out of our grasp, that we really had to have one guy to save us. It was like, hey, we're going to be good regardless of what this decision is. And so I think we all ended up with those 5 transfers filling specific roles of areas of need for us, and guys that they all said they want to win. And every time these recruits happen, you guys wouldn't be surprised, but I want to win, I want to develop. And then the decision goes to another one of the money or the program, whatever it is. But I do think if you are very open about who you are and where you're going, we've tried to do that, just point guys back to our players, and it was a successful strategy for us this year.
Yeah, I think the major league comp is a fun one, because your transfer portal offseason very much was like, okay, you're maximizing your title window. You're bringing in, infielder, you lose an infielder, you bring in a couple talented ones. You want to strengthen your bullpen, your pitching staff. You go out and get a couple, but very targeted specific was pretty interesting to see.
And that's like, we have those conversations as a staff. I talk about like crossing the aisle all the time. It's always been something that I've enjoyed doing through my pro career, is have a pitcher as a roommate, like talk about, what matchups you would have and how you'd pitch guys. And so our staff spends a lot of time saying, at the end of the day, value's value. And if you do in a sport now where money is involved, you do have to treat it a little more like a pro organization. Of, you can sit there and set aside funds or certain amount of slots for pitching or left-handed. You want to get more left-handed? Well, everybody wants to get more left-handed, right? Hey, I want to get power. Well, everybody wants power, but if you get a guy that can't play defense that has power, there's only 2 places, basically maybe 3 on the field you can stick him. And if you already have incoming freshmen that are corner guys. So I think there was a lot of early mornings and late nights and dives. And then you also do have to have the gut feel of, does this guy fit, the program pillars that we talk about, which is like toughness, discipline, and together. And so are these guys going to embody that at their current spot? I think that's been something that we've had to have a lot of deliberate conversations about, knowing that we can't just buy guys and wow them right away. And as these trophies hopefully continue to, you start winning more and you start getting guys drafted and do all those things like we've done, then it just becomes a more desirable spot, portal cycle after portal cycle.
James, do you have a crystallized idea of what the lineup's going to be 1 through 9 at this point? Like how many spots are even, quote, up for grabs?
Yeah, I think we have a feel, and the old saying, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, I think you would like to sit there and say, okay, well, we actually did fix it late in the year and start leading number 8 off again. And we scored in like 11 of 12 games in the first inning, and the formula got fixed, right? And Lodi's ended up hitting, 3. I would not say we have it all figured out. I would say that, we have a lot of combinations we like. The fun part is you let all these things kind of the chips fall where they are. You got to get player health out of the way. You have to have another body of work of the next couple weeks. And we guys have great falls and not good preseasons and vice versa. I think we need to let that happen. The fun part is I love scouting. I love diving into the tactics of how are you going to beat so-and-so? How are you going to put your guys in a position? We are very balanced right, left. We're very athletic. We can steal bases, go back to Friday night, Virginia Tech last year. I think we stole 6 bases on a Friday night and end up winning a 1-run game. And those are the things that matter. And they were guys stealing maybe that didn't end up having the most amount of stolen bases. But, Coach Schulman does an unbelievable job on the base running side. And there's an art and a science. And so for this year's team, Daron, it's like we have power. We have guys that can run. We have guys that can hit for contact. And, do you want the guy hitting in contact leading off, speed guys? Or do you want a guy that can slug more in the leadoff spot and then have your contact guy be 4-hole when there's going to be the most amount of guys in scoring position that maybe a single scores them and you just don't need a strikeout or a double play? So I think everybody, as much as I'd like to think we have a feel for it, we hit 12 both fall games. And that was those 12 guys that are kind of in the mix at the time. That's what I kind of joked that I was copping out a little bit on that. But at the same time, those guys earned it. And so I said, as long as we don't have to hit 9, we're not going to hit 9. And so I think that we will, like the catching situation, obviously Drew Rogers, he's a catcher, man. I mean, on any other given year, you have Parada go in the first round, you'll have Lackey go in the first round. Drew Rogers is very much in that type conversation for us. And so when Drew Rogers catches, Lackey can play anywhere on the field. And, we're hoping to figure out a spot where he will play every position other than pitch in a game. I think he deserves that. I think it'd be cool to give him that recognition. And he is that good at all those positions. The other day we're having live ABs and he's like kind of chirping us over our shoulder in the dugout. And we didn't have the full defense out there because we were kind of doing rotations. And we look up and he catches a ball at third. And it was like a movie scene. We're like, you're just here. And then he decided to go get a rep. And within 2 seconds of being out there, he catches a ball and makes a routine play. And that's just who Lackey is. But I think that's a good example of, okay, when that puzzle piece, when Rogers is catching, where's Lackey go and who was DHing? And now where does that kind of cycle in? But, Will Baker's been up to the task, had a great second half in the Cape. He's going to play the outfield. He's going to play the infield. He's ready to go at any of those positions. Hernandez, played the infield almost exclusively in the fall, and it, will most likely step back out to right field. But even yesterday, live ground ball session, I mean, he's turning double plays. He's catching balls really well at third, at second. So the good news is when we have a slide like we did that caught the injury bug on a road trip to Miami, you won't have to sit there and be playing guys that, are below league average defensively or offensively or don't have the experience. Any guy that we're going to run out there right out of the gate is going to have played in the league and is going to show stretches that they can be an above average producer at the ACC level.
Yeah, depth is a good problem to have. We could talk about the offense for hours, probably. Switching gears to kind of the pitching side of things. I know we've talked about this. You've probably talked about this with everyone where it's, you guys were a good pitching team last year. Like, fourth in the ACC in ERA. You guys, I think it was somewhere around 4.8, 4.9 ERA after, up north of 7 in 2023. So there's been clear, measurable progress in that department. And you bring back McKee, Patel, you have Loin, Shattuck. I guess sort of two parts. One, are you sick of hearing those kind of things about the pitching? And then two, what does it kind of look like going into this spring?
Yeah, I mean, the first part, I definitely am. And I think now leading the program, right, there's ways you can say something and then you can convince people all you want until it happens. You don't have the backing of reality, right? I think what we've been able to see too is if we focus too much on the offense or any other sector, I think you end up saying what needs to be said without saying it. You get that may be a soundbite in itself, but it's like by talking about one area, you may, people can kind of tell you're not talking about another area a little bit and say, oh, maybe that's. So I think the focus has just been on winning and internally. And so it's like, guys, can you pick each other up whenever that time is? Because I promise you a 6-run lead on a Friday night, we still need to add runs. We still need to play good defense because if we don't have to go get bullpen arm number 3 with a 6-run lead, he's more fresh on Sunday. Oh, and by the way, when you're playing one of the toughest midweek schedules in the country, multiple Tuesdays last year, we had our 3 best bullpen arms red down. Now we swept, an ACC weekend before, or we won a series, but if you want to host or you want to be a top 8 seed or you want to be the best baseball team, I end up putting a lot of that on the offense. Like, y'all need to carry the weight on a Tuesday when you're up by 4 so we don't have to go get Patel last year. Because you go get Patel Tuesday, now he may be ready Friday, but you're not going Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. And so we've just focused on the complementary aspect. But since we're talking about the pitching, it's done everything from the pitching side. It's been a byproduct of a lot of the same principles on the offensive side. It's hard work, right? It's a data-driven, process approach. And then you go recruit really good athletes that are buying into what you're selling. Okay. And then and on the flip side is, if you're going to acquire guys via transfer, are you good at doing the things that they need to become the most productive pitcher? Because once again, it's no different than hitting. Okay, everybody wants stuff. Everybody wants velo or breaking balls that get chased out of the zone. Those guys are really expensive. Okay, so if you're going to say, well, we just want value, maybe it's finding a plug and play option that has a really high floor with multiple pitches. But I think Matt and Jason have done a really good job of having those conversations of, okay, we can't have, I hope next year we're sitting here saying we had a first round arm now transfer in that's a projected first rounder, kind of like in Vicula. But if we're not there right this second, how do we still get there? And I think, you mentioned those arms, the 3 freshmen, those were guys that we were recruiting multiple years ago they committed with us, one of the lowest Power 4 pitching operations in Power 4. And those guys were buying what we were selling and hadn't currently done yet. Now that we're doing it, just imagine the conversations we're able to have with the high schoolers to try to get the talent in the door. And so, you have Charlie Wilcox, Cooper Underwood, and Jamie Vicens, right? You have 2 of them are in the combine. You have Underwood, well documented, turns down a ton of money to show up here, has been awesome. Charlie Wilcox wanted to come here. Those guys can set a high number in the draft, wanted to come here and be a stud and do it. So I think if you look at, I'm going to add Adam McKelvey into this mix and Jackson Blakely. The 5 of those guys a year from now, once again, should be here, should be high producers. And now the narrative's dead because you're winning, you're keeping guys, you're developing guys, and you're not having to sell something that you're not currently doing. And so I think that that's been the theme in the building is depth, give us a lot of options. You look at every super regional Omaha caliber team, there's always someone pitching big leverage innings towards the end of the season that has less than 20 innings thrown because everybody else was in front of them, but they're still plenty good enough to step up, or they had an injury and now they're rehabbing back. And so, if you look at the guys I just named, then you add Porter Bursama into the mix, who's just absolutely electric. You add Carson Ballard, who's done nothing but ho-hum, take the ball every time we need him, go out there, fill up the zone, protect leads, step in on short weeks or short rest. You kind of throw those guys into the mix and you go, we really are deep on the mound. And I like to think we all know enough from our pro experience or college coaching days to know what a good arm looks like. All those guys are really good. And so I don't know right now, who's going to be pitching in exactly what roles. And then the last one is, I didn't mention Caden Campbell or Caden Spivey, who are old, experienced ACC guys that have pitched at the highest level and made weekend starts and made high leverage innings. And once again, every really good team has those savvy vets that also, both those guys have loud stuff and can strap anybody on a given day. And so I think, there's reason why we feel as confident as we do, because it's not going to all have to rely on a McKee or a Patel. You kind of go down the line and we'll manage that, whether it's, one time through the order for some of those guys, arm number 6 through 11, or it's, hey, we're going to give these guys the first opportunity and we're going to protect some of the young guys, or we're going to thrust some of the young guys in on midweeks, or they're going to piggyback each other on a Sunday non-conference, whatever it looks like is. For us, we want to win every game, right? From day one. We also want to have a long enough sight of, okay, if we're playing these games to figure out who we want to be pitching in April, May, and June. I think that's something on the pitching side. You have to kind of ride guys and know, get him out when he's doing well. And I think that's the thing. If you don't have a lot of depth, you have to keep guys pitching longer than you want them to. And then by June, they're not their best selves. On the flip side, some of these young guys, we're gonna pitch them early and we're gonna challenge them and we're gonna bring them in high leverage situations, or we're gonna give them a chance to start for building on the future. I think those are guys that have come here because they want to have a big role. And, we had our first 2 days of lives, and the theme was not about a single hitter. It was not about a single defender, even though those guys did a really good job. It was about every guy in the pitching staff clearly did what they needed to do over the break. And I probably think that's the first staff since I've been a coach that has truly done that every single arm. Like there's no guys can't go. There's no guys are really rusty and just 8 straight balls, whatever. I mean, that's totally normal. We were as sharp as I feel like we've been, and it's a testament to the work those guys have put in.
That's a fine place to finish it because we got to wrap up at some point. As Bradley said earlier, we could talk to you for hours. Obviously, you got stuff to take care of as we look toward opening day. James, really appreciate this. Great to see you. I'm sure we'll see you around various ACC parks once the season gets started in earnest. But good to talk to you and appreciate it as always.
Always a pleasure, guys. Definitely look forward to seeing y'all more this spring.